Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? Adjumant Cinedrop can be guys here today with another deck tech. So today we're taking a look at a standard build, and it is Esper control. So for you guys that are unfamiliar with Esper, it's a color combination of blue, white, and black. And for this deck, it's pretty traditional as far as Esper control builds go. You can win with aggro, but aggro is kind of less consistent than being able to mill out your opponent, which is the kind of key thing with this deck. You're going to be using stuff like Mind Grind, Jace Memory Adept, as well as Nephalia Drownyard, to be able to have a really consistent way of just getting your opponent to 0 cards in their deck and just winning off of that. But I also have some other cards that can Entreat the Angels, Lingering Souls, Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, where you can win with aggro and beat down your opponent and get them to 0 life. So we're going to take a look at this deck. It's significantly better now in Gatecrash in the beginning of the season than it was in Return to Ravnica. We have some more things that we get to play around with, but we'll break it down here today. Before we get to that, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below. Now, the first thing that we're taking a look at here is the land base of the deck. So it's pretty heavy as far as dual lands go. We have our shock lands here first, so we're running a playset of Watery Graves. We also have a playset of Hallowed Fountains. We're actually only running 3 Godless Shrine here. I ended up cutting the 4th one to run another Nephalia Drownyard in the deck. So we have 3 of those. We're running Drowned Catacombs as a playset. Also a playset of Isolated Chapel. A playset of Glacial Fortress. And then we have our utility lands being the Nephalia Drownyard. So I originally had 2, and 2 was like what I played for most of the previous seasons as well, where I was playing Esper Control. But Nephalia Drownyard is really good. It lets us mill for 3. It's not a spell, so like control decks can't counter it. So that's the one most consistent thing about it, is you just play it. And if you have the surplus mana left over, aside from what you're doing in the given turn, if you're doing anything, you're able to mill out your opponent and just have a slow start at chipping away at their deck and giving them less things that they can actually play with. So the 3 Nephalia Drownyards as a slow win condition, but definitely a consistent one that does occur very often. So that's the land base that we have for the deck, and now we're going to take a look at everything else. We actually don't run any creatures in the deck. I did playtest with Snapcaster a little bit and Obzidot as well. Both of them are really fine cards. Snapcaster didn't have enough synergy for me to actually favor him in this build. There were a few things that he can flashback, but ultimately there weren't enough for me to give him any slots in the deck. And Obzidot, while he is really, really strong, I ended up just running other cards over him for now. That could change. I could put Obzidot in here, but for now, as far as the beginning of the season goes, I'm not running any creatures. So we have Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, so he is our 3 loyalty, 4-cost Planeswalker. Mainly, we're going to be playing off of his +1 and his -2 abilities. His +1 makes a 1/1 black vampire with lifelink. So this is going to help us against aggro. It's going to buy us some time. We can block with it. We can gain back a really... it's a very minuscule amount of life, but it's still life gain nonetheless. So we can gain life off of that lifelink 1/1. But Sorin can also make a emblem which gives our creatures +1/+0 for pretty much the remainder of the game. You can't get rid of emblems. So if we're trying to be more aggressive with it, with like Lingering Souls, Entreat the Angels, and the tokens that Sorin is making, we can start making some emblems for ourselves and be able to just bash in our opponent from there. Aside from Sorin, we're also running Jace Memory Adept, so he's the more consistent win condition that we have, 4 loyalty, 5 cost. And basically, we're going to be using his 0 ability, where we mill our opponent for 10 cards off at the top of their library. So we have 2 Jaces in the main board, 1 in the sideboard for when we want to be a little bit more aggressive against control, which is going to be pretty much most of the times. We're going to just side in another one when it's safe, when the decks aren't being really way too fast. And then we have our consistent 3 Jaces where we can just start milling out our opponent and winning. We have 1 Entreat the Angels, and it was a singleton. Sever the Bloodline isn't as huge anymore now, so Entreat the Angels is slightly better. There's still Detention Sphere that can deal with multiple tokens of the same name, But even still, Entreat the Angels, even off of the Miracle cost for X and double white, is really good, creating 4/4s for us. And if you're able to create a dozen of them, or well, not specifically a dozen, but a whole lot of them, then you're pretty much set for aggro and being able to deal with a lot of the creatures that they're able to put out onto the battlefield. And it also gives you an aggressive edge where you can actually win the game off of dealing damage. Like I mentioned before, we do have Mind Grind in the deck for a win condition, so it's a sorcery speed card for X, 1 blue, and 1 black. So we mill our opponent until they reach X amount of lands. X can't be 0. With that, it's better and worse than Mind Funeral, just because Mind Funeral, you could cast it like earlier on, but this is strictly a late game card when you have a whole lot of mana left open. Whenever you get to the really late game, Mind Grind is just that finisher. It's just an easy way to mill out your opponent for whatever they have left in their deck. So I'm just running 1 Mind Grind, and I know a lot of people probably watched me open the Mind Grind out of one of my Gatecrash boxes, and even in the video I said, I'm going to be using this for Standard. I really love this, and I wanted 1 foil Mind Grind. But moving aside from that, we have our draw spells in the deck. So we have Think Twice, and that's going to be a playset for us. Being able to draw a card for 2, and then it has a flashback for 3. So we're running a playset of Think Twice. We also have Azorius Charm in the deck, so I'm running 3 of them, where you can either draw a card, give your creature's lifelink, or put attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So up against aggro, we can put one of their creatures that's attacking or blocking on top of their opponent's deck. We can draw a card if we really need to dig, or we can give lifelink to our creatures if we have a massive amount of Lingering Soul tokens, or Entreat the Angel tokens, or even Sorin tokens. Well, actually, no, not Sorin tokens, because they already have lifelink, but Lingering Souls and Entreat the Angels is where we're going to be going off of giving creatures lifelink. But the 3 Azorius Charms do end up working as ways to be able to draw more and dig. So we have 3 of those. We also have Sphinx's Revelation, so we gain X amount of life and draw X amount of cards for X, 1 blue, 1 white and double blue. So 3 Sphinx's Revelations. Even if they play Skullcrack, game 2 or game 3, because chances are they're not going to be running it game 1 in the main board. You shouldn't be running Skullcrack in the main board as far as any decks go. But Sphinx's Revelation is nice even if they play Skullcrack against us, because we can still draw cards and we can dig into getting board wipe elements, or maybe even another Sphinx's Revelation to actually be able to draw more and gain life. But Sphinx's Revelation is nice ultimately. It lets us get our win conditions out, and it also gains us life unless they play Skullcrack against it. But even in that case, we're still drawing. From there, we have our Lingering Souls, so I'm running a playset of it. 3 cost card gives us 2 1/1s with flying, and it has a flashback cost of 1 generic and 1 black. The biggest problem that you would have with Lingering Souls is playing up against Thundermaw Hellkite, or dealing with Bonfire of the Damned. Thundermaw Hellkite, I think, is a little bit more played than Bonfire of the Damned. Bonfire of the Damned sees some prominent play in specific builds, but for the vast majority, I think that you're pretty much safe with Lingering Souls as having it for creating blockers up until you get to Thundermaw Hellkite. Then you kind of have to like work around with it and just try to sideboard efficiently to where your opponent's not really going to get the upper hand off of playing Thundermaw Hellkite, and you're just kind of left hopeless. But Lingering Souls is definitely really good. It produces blockers, and it can also produce attackers for us if we want to be aggressive and we have the outlets to being aggressive. So playset of Lingering Souls. We're also running Supreme Verdict. So Supreme Verdict is just a 2-up for us. Can't be countered, destroy all creatures for 4 mana. One of the problems with Supreme Verdict is hitting into Boros Charm if they respond with Boros Charm and give all their creatures indestructible. Well, all permanents in general, but if they give their creatures indestructible, it's kind of an annoyance. But Supreme Verdict is a good end-all for when your opponent doesn't have like Boros Charm to give them all indestructible, but being able to just clear the field for 4 mana is pretty optimal. A card that doesn't have bias against that will be Terminus. So it's a 6-cost card at a sorcery speed with a miracle for 1 white. Put all creatures on the bottom of their owner's libraries. So Terminus is a way to just really easily get around Azorius Charm trying to give indestructible to creatures. It just has no bias against that. So 3 Terminus for more board wiping. It's a little bit more risky because it is a 6 cost card, but at the same time, there's always the chance of hitting into it with a miracle. And you can also think twice during your opponent's turn, and if you draw Terminus, assuming that it's the first card that you drew during your opponent's turn, you can play the miracle cost during your opponent's turn and get rid of their field. So one nice thing to remember about Terminus, and one thing that you want to remember, is keep white mana open. If you're going to think twice during your opponent's turn, keep at least 1 white mana open so you can use Terminus, or like a removal spell like Ultimate Price. Like keep black and white open, because it is perfectly possible depending on how much mana you have open. But speaking of Ultimate Price, we have it in the board as well. So I'm running 2 of them here. So destroy target monocolored creature for 2 mana, 1 generic and 1 black. So it hits into a lot of things. There are plenty of monocolored creatures that we want to get rid of and we don't want our opponent to use. Hellrider is a big nuisance. Thundermaw Hellkite, even though it's already going to get rid of the Lingering Soul tokens, we don't want him to swing in with that haste guy, and it's really annoying when he does. So Ultimate Price deals with that. Angel of Glory's Rise, it deals with the combo if they're trying to go infinite. Also, Angel of Serenity, it deals with that. There's a lot of things that it deals with. Ultimate Price is just overall really good. You get value out of having it at instant speed. I'm also running Barter and Blood as a 2-of, so this is another card that gets around that awkward situation of Boros Charm giving indestructible. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures for a 4-cost sorcery, so it's a nice way of getting around that. It also gets around Geist of St. Traft if our opponent's using it. We also have Geist of St. Traft in our sideboard, but ours is actually just going to be played to outrace other control. But Barter and Blood is a nice way to deal with any of the Simic Bant Delver lists that are out there, because they like to run like Delver and Geist of St. Traft. If they play Delver turn 1, like turn 3 play Geist of St. Traft, and we're already on our, we were playing, so we would be hitting our 4th land whenever they play their Geist of St. Traft on the previous turn. We can hit into Barter and Blood and get rid of both of their creatures and not really have to worry about that. Like, that's a really specific situation, but Barter and Blood is good. Regardless of what given situation, like what turn it is, Barter and Blood is still really good. And it's a really good means of getting rid of multiple creatures for a pretty convenient amount of mana. Then we have Detention Sphere, so I'm running 2 Detention Spheres to be able to exile target non-land permanent, not named Detention Sphere, and all other permanents with the same name for 3. So it's an easy way to get rid of Planeswalkers, creatures, anything that's really annoying. And then the last card that we have in the main board is actually Blind Obedience, so this is a 3-of. And I actually like it as a 3-of. I played it as a 2-of, and I kind of wanted to see it a little bit more, but it deals with haste creatures that our opponent has. It makes them come into the battlefield tapped. And it also has Extort, and it's a 2-cost card. So with the Extort, whenever we have surplus mana open, we can pay that 1 white or black, and we can gain 1 life and make our opponent lose 1 life, which is definitely really nice. It gives us a really nice edge over our opponent when we're casting stuff like Ultimate Price to respond to a creature like Hellrider coming in, and then we have plenty of other mana open, so we can just play. We can pay that 1 and gain 1 and make them lose 1. Unfortunately, you can only use Extort for 1 for each trigger. You can't pay like 5 mana, gain 5, and make them lose 5. You can only use it once and make them lose 1 and gain 1. But even still, Extort is really strong in this deck and lets us use up our mana efficiently. So that's the main board here. Now let's take a look at what we have in the sideboard here. So for our sideboard, we have Negate, which is pretty typical as far as control decks go that are running blue. And, well, most control decks are going to have blue. So Negate lets us counter non-creature spells. So it's going to side in for us up against mid-range builds like Jund mid-range and other control variants where they're running a lot of non-creature things. So 3 Negates, pretty standard as far as a control deck will go. We're also running 2 Nevermore in the sideboard. It's an enchantment, and whenever it enters the battlefield, we name a non-land card. The named card can't be cast, and it's a 3-cost enchantment. With Nevermore, one of the biggest issues that this deck is going to have, and a lot of control decks are going to have, is Slaughter Games. Slaughter Games, they can name your win conditions or anything that you need, and they can effectively just get rid of it, and it leaves you kind of in the off end. It just gives you less things that you have to work with. So we can have Nevermore, and we can name something like Slaughter Games or win conditions. Win conditions are perfectly reasonable as well. But we can name nuisance cards like that and not have to worry about them. But Slaughter Games is a big thing that I keep on naming with Nevermore. And it buys us some time. It definitely leaves us in the positive end of things as far as board state goes for being able to deal with other things that our opponent's doing. And if they can't find a way to get rid of Nevermore, it leaves us in a pretty good spot for the rest of the game. So 2 Nevermore to name things that will give us problems given based on what we're playing against. Then we have Geist the Traft, like I mentioned earlier. Geist the Traft is a 3 in the sideboard, and this is going to side in up against really slow decks, mainly like the control matchup, because we can side in Geist the Traft, and he has hexproof. He's a really aggressive card, and it forces him. It forces your opponent to have to get rid of him, because otherwise he's swinging in for 6 to himself and another 4 off of the 4/4 that he's creating whenever he's attacking. So he ends up swinging for a whole lot, and he can't be killed with any conventional removal that just says target. So that's really good. His hexproof keeps him pretty stable. So 3 Geist the Traft. We're also running some more sweepers in the sideboard as well. So we have 1 more Terminus in the sideboard for aggro, and 1 more Supreme Verdict in the sideboard as well, to be able to just get rid of massive amounts of creatures if we really need it, especially if it's a really quick-paced deck. We want to have more sweepers. We are running 3 Rest in Peace for any graveyard interaction decks, like Reanimator, the combo Reanimator decks, like Human Reanimator. So Rest in Peace is there to put Bane to all of the graveyard synergies and interactions. So 3 of those. We're also running 1 Psychic Spiral up against the Mirror Match, because the Mirror Match is going to mill us out. That's what Control against Control is going to do. They're going to want to mill you out before you're able to mill out them. So Psychic Spiral is here at an instant speed, where we shuffle all cards from our graveyard into our library, and target player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So we get to kind of like reverse the role of mill for us, and get back anything that was milled into our graveyard while milling out our opponent as well. So we have that, and we have the 1 other Jace Memory Adept. So like I said whenever we were talking about Jace initially, when it comes to other control matchups and like really slow matchups, we're able to just side in another Jace and be more aggressive with this deck, rather than having the defensive and unproductive role during the kind of like early and mid game. Jace lets us be a whole lot more aggressive. So that is the main board in the sideboard for Esper control as far as the early Gatecrash season goes. So if you guys enjoyed it, please be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content. The entire list for the deck that I have here is down below, where you guys can check it out and use it as a reference, as well as a playlist to all the previous decks that I've covered on the channel, so be sure to check that out as well. And until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.